Tuttle and Eli Goldberg. Cathy is the co-founder of the organization as well as the executive director of Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. She has her PhD in urban design and planning at the UW. During her stay at the UW and the many things that she did, one of the items was teaching a graduate class in urban design considerations during transportation planning activities. She served 2 years on the Seattle Planning Commission staff, 5 years as a planner project manager for Seattle Parks. She's also served as a part of the startup team for the Indicators of Sustainability Seattle with Richard Conlon and the Indicators for Pedestrian-Friendly Streets and Urban Open Space. So welcome, Cathy. Eli is a community volunteer for Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. Professionally, he works as a user experience researcher at Microsoft, where he studies how people use, learn, and enjoy technology products. And we need more of you. One of the things that he did before he came to Microsoft is he worked in software engineering for a variety of Silicon Valley companies such as Netscape and Apple. He says he's excited for a future of Seattle and Puget Sound where everyone feels safe and comfortable walking and bicycling. So Eli's going to kick this off, and then Cathy will come in with him. I've had a chance to visit with both of them beforehand. I told them I've gone through their website, and I'm telling you, in a very short period of time, their organization has only been in place for 18 months, and they've accomplished quite a bit in a short period of time. They have now over 20 neighborhoods that have joined with them and are active in this Greenways movement. So. And in talking with Eli and with Cathy, it's easy to see why, because I'm pumped to hear what you have to say. Thank you.
So yeah, thanks for the honor of the chance for us to speak here. This is really exciting. So we are here from Seattle Neighborhood Greenways, and I want to start with a little bit of research on you guys. Raise your hand if you've already heard about Neighborhood Greenways. Pretty much everyone. Keep your hand up if you've ridden or walked on Neighborhood Greenway. Okay, so about half the room. So neighborhood greenways are a new street type. You guys have heard of them already. What they really are is an update to the venerable bicycle boulevard. Neighborhood greenways are slow-paced streets. They're a block or two off an arterial. You make them great for people of all ages to walk and great to bike, where kids can play in the street, where communities get stronger because people can interact more and more. And now Seattle is joining the list of cities that are getting these built on a network and as a connected system. It's happening through an unusual and we think productive partnership between community volunteers and advocates like Cathy and myself, and through city staff like Dong Ho Chang and Doug and so forth. We're going to talk about 4 things today during your luncheon. The first is what greenways are and how they work. The second is why greenways are attracting such broad support. 20 neighborhoods in Kirkland in 18 months, 1,000 active volunteers. It's because of what greenways make possible that get people excited. We're going to talk, number 3, a bit about what's going on in Seattle and why it's taken off here. And finally, we're going to end with what you can do with greenways in your own cities and opportunities for you guys. So I'm going to start with the introduction on what are neighborhood greenways. But first, I'd like to ask you guys to think back to the street you grew up on. Can everyone else remember that far back? So who played in the streets when you were a kid? Raise your hand. So nearly everyone. Like, shout out some of the things you did when you were playing in the street.
Street hockey.
Street hockey.
Baseball.
Baseball.
Tag.
Tag. Okay, so a bunch of stuff. I was more introverted, so after a minute I just biked around my neighborhood a whole bunch. So now I want to ask, raise your hand again if you would let your kids do those things today on the street you live on. So there's a bunch.
Wow.
We wish it would be everyone, but there's still a good bunch. So what we're going to be talking about is how do we go to a world, a city where really everyone can raise their hands. And the reason why is because our belief that the things we were talking about, the ability to play tag, the ability to ride your bike, to play basketball in the street, are indicators, markers of a safe and healthy residential neighborhood street, right? These are things that you can only do in a place. You can't play in a road. You have to play in an actual place. And that's why we believe in the importance of streets as places. And we're going to be talking about the process of making our residential streets into safe, healthy places again, what it means to go beyond just being channels of movement and becoming public spaces where our families and where our loved ones can bike, walk, play, and all those other great things. Time for another show of hands. Who would send your child or your loved one to bike to school on this street? Raise your hand. Anyone? Okay, so I'm showing this photo to illustrate an idea for your consideration. And that idea is that making streets that are safe and healthy for everyone requires going beyond implementing the engineering standards. The bike lane we're looking at, I'm assuming you guys would know better, is fully compliant with the AASHTO guide. And these are really the bread and butter of American urban bicycle infrastructure. Seattle was even critically acclaimed in Bicycling Magazine, League of American Bicyclists, as one of our top American cities based on, really our network of these kinds of streets. And yet we all just said we wouldn't trust our kids to one of these. I think it's pretty fair, I would agree with you guys. If you look at the risks here, there's certainly dooring. All this Lexus driver has to do is open the door and this girl's in the hospital or is gonna be run over. The intersections are pretty intimidating. How's she gonna make a left turn there? She's just gonna merge with traffic. And most importantly, it's just not a forgiving street. There's a lot of user types. They're in conflict. They're at different speeds. And if someone makes a mistake, or more accurately, when someone makes mistakes, it's going to be the slower, the more vulnerable person who's going to be the victim. And I know many people here are tasked with taking streets just like this and doing the best you can to make bike infrastructure that's safe and welcoming for as many people, and you don't have the flexibility to do what you'd like to do. And you're stuck in a rock and a hard place, we feel for you, and that's why we want to introduce the idea of neighborhood greenways as one more tool you might want to consider for your toolkit. This is a photo of a greenway. As you can see, of course, it's not a separated multi-use trail. It is that residential street with low traffic speed and volume. We update these streets to be great for walking, biking, and living on. We're adding traffic calming when you make one of these streets. And the goal is that the design speed of the street, not just the posted speed, the actual design speed, should be down to 20-25 miles an hour. We improve the arterial crossings both for bikes and people walking. And cars, of course, are permitted, as you can see here, but it's primarily for residents and for service vehicles. These are designed to be lousy streets if you want to cut through to avoid traffic on an arterial. They're taking hold in Chicago. This one's from Vancouver. You can see the Canadian flag over there. And Portland, and now Seattle, and so forth. And these are the kinds of kids where, would you guys let a kid ride on the street?
Oh yeah.
So these are the kind of streets that I know I would feel safe if I had kids letting them ride on it. And I think many of you have worked with bike boulevards, I'm gonna guess, so I just wanted to give like a quick disambiguation of the difference between a bike boulevard and a greenway. So greenways really are just an envisioning of bike boulevards. And the idea is that you wanna offer value to the majority, not to the minority of people who bike. So this matters because if you need the political support to build a comprehensive connected network, you can only do that if you have something for everyone, and that's what we're aspiring towards. So there are really 4 big changes going from a boulevard to a greenway. Number 1 is you start with lower traffic volumes and a reduced speed to begin with. Number 2 is you aim for safe crossings, not just for bikes, but for everyone. And that means you look at every single busy intersection and you try to make it safe. Third, you provide prominent route signage, because these are not arterial streets and people need to be able to follow the greenway as easily as possible. And finally, you provide the kinds of amenities that make these great public spaces and not just pipes for bikes. to borrow a metaphor, right? So you put in trees, you put in street furniture, even pocket parks they're doing in Portland. They have a traffic calming and stormwater pocket park. It's amazing. So when you put all these things together, you get an actual place and not just, a pipe for vehicles. And I'm gonna show you guys a short film from Portland that really gives a human picture to all of this. And I'm just wondering, this is the streets film of Greenways. Has anyone seen this already? So about 15%. Okay, awesome. So, I need just one moment.
Welcome to Portland. We're turning our bike boulevards into neighborhood greenways and working to create a citywide system that's great to live and play and get around by walking and biking.
How's the volume?
Preparation for our 25-year master plan for biking, we did a lot of research and we did a lot of focus groups about what it would take to get from 8 to 25% of all trips by bike. And what we learned is that bike boulevards, we also call them greenways, is the way to go.
Over the next 5 years, we're going to be increasing the percentage of Portlanders that live within a half mile of a family-friendly bicycle and pedestrian facility from less than 25% to over 80%. The main tool that we're using to achieve those outcomes is the Neighborhood Greenway project.
So right now we're riding on the going neighborhood greenway. One of the things that we do to make these routes pleasant is we make sure cars are going slow. And we do that by installing speed bumps. On this route, we turned the orientation of 19 stop signs to make it a through route for bicycles. In addition, we put in 21 new speed bumps to make sure that we kept the speed down for cars. And then we put in some traffic barriers to make sure that there's not that many cars here in the first place.
Even in Portland, one of the biggest challenges to creating a family-friendly network is getting bicyclists and pedestrians across busy streets. At this crossing of the Going Neighborhood Greenway project and Martin Luther King Boulevard, we extended the median island and allowed pass-throughs for bicyclists and pedestrians. It's made this project much easier and friendly and comfortable for people that are crossing this busy street.
Behind me is one of our guide signs that we use on our neighborhood greenway network to let people know where they're going. We show up to 3 destinations, how far it is, and how long it takes to get there. Our new signs that we've started to use, we made the bicycle symbol a little smaller and the words bigger. This is a sharrow flower. We use it at the junction of our neighborhood greenway route so that people know that they have a decision to make. We're standing on the Concord Neighborhood Greenway where it meets the Bryant Neighborhood Greenway. And this is where they make up their mind.
A lot of our old bike boulevards had volumes that were over 1,000 cars a day. With our next generation Neighborhood Greenway projects, we're trying to get the volume of cars down to below 500 if possible. We're also going to be working in the state legislature to create a 20-mile-per-hour neighborhood greenway speed designation. If this passes, we'll be able to engineer our projects to a slower, more trail-like speed, which will increase the comfort and safety of cyclists and pedestrians.
Complement to the bike boulevards, and we've been really fortunate for the city's support in installing these bike boulevards that really make it safe to ride on and really welcoming for kids.
Last year, when Safe Routes to School brought bike education to the 5th graders here at Beach, I had 3 children, none of whom knew how to ride a bike. My 5th grader's teacher volunteered to try to help her learn while the other kids were learning bike safety. They started on Monday. By Wednesday, my 5th grader could ride a bike. By Friday, her brother in 2nd grade could ride a bike. And 2 weeks later, her sister could ride a bike, and my husband got his bike out of the basement where it had lived for 20 years, and got going on a bike again, and we're all riding.
You can see all the bike racks we have behind. Those are all quite new. I've been here for 17 years, and we didn't have one bike rack when I first started here. So I think the most exciting thing is that a lot of our kids come ready to learn because they've gotten fresh air, they've gotten exercise, they feel a part of our school community.
One of the other benefits of bicycle boulevards is using stormwater treatments in the design to not only calm traffic, but to also manage the stormwater that otherwise would be going into our sewer system.
You can see the Green Street, managing stormwater, trees, creating a better pedestrian and bike environment, and also cleaning the air and capturing stormwater. Speed bumps, slowing traffic. We choose vegetation that's low to keep sight distances open. One of our workhorse species is juncus. Because of all of the dense vegetation at the bottom, it collects pollutants when the water is flowing through the plants. When you're in Portland, you will see a diversity of Green Street projects. You'll see them being used as traffic diverters. At 33rd and Going, you will see a new layout that we're using. This is the more traditional curb extension used to prevent basement sewer backups in little pockets of neighborhoods.
From Parks' perspective, we like the Greenways because they can, first of all, connect existing open spaces or planned open spaces. But they can also provide a level of service in areas where we can't get a park. So if we don't have land in an area or it's too expensive in an area to build a park, we see the opportunity in working in the streets and are adjacent to the streets in providing a level of amenity that reads and feels like a park. We also see some social benefits as well, I believe, because people are interacting with their neighbors, they're looking out for each other, and they're exercising.
Having it be on a residential street where it's really calm, it's a really great social atmosphere where people can talk and get to know each other.
When I commute to work down the Going Street Greenway, I see people out walking in the street and running in the street. People feel safer in any sort of transportation mode.
They're on a quiet street where the stop signs are in their favor, where that bike boulevard is prioritized for the bike, not the car, for the pedestrian, not the car, and that it actually, in many cases, is the most reliable trip in terms of time travel, is the quickest trip when you include, the time to park, is the cheapest trip when you include the cost of parking, and it's a trip that allows them to both get to work and exercise.
Welcome back. So you can see from this film why community members, and such a diverse set of community members like we see in Seattle, get really excited about greenways, having streets like these. I want to come back to that greenway we looked at from Vancouver, BC. And you can see all the elements they talked about in the film. You have the traffic diverter that you would expect in a bike boulevard. When you make this not just a bike boulevard, but a greenway, you add in, of course, a tree canopy, although this probably takes more than a year or two to grow. You have, natural stormwater treatment, if possible, pleasant green elements that make it enjoyable to be on the street. There's street furniture. There's a bench over there. You can see it hiding in the corner. Make it a place to sit and relax. So this is, I think, what makes greenways attractive to communities even more than bike boulevards, that the sum really is, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts when you add it up to it, right? Because you're not just getting a place where you can have safer bicycling, but you get all those outcomes that we're talking about in the film, right? You get improved public health, you have improved community, and so forth. I want to make a tangent here. It's kind of related to the slide because, as you can see, this is an arterial crossing with the Greenway. And I am, of course, not a traffic engineer, but we get to talk with traffic engineers. And we hear often that one of the most challenging parts of building greenways is when they intersect with arterials. And we're really glad people like you work on problems like this. One of the things that we hear a lot is that the prevailing AASHTO and the MUTCD guides don't give you the flexibility that you need to make intersections that actually are prioritized for bikes and prioritized for pedestrians on streets like this. And I just want to do another call of hands. Who's already heard of NACTO? Okay, so the majority of people here, I want to ask, who's taken a class or done a webinar in NACTO? Raise your hand again. So fewer. And who's actually used one of the NACTO guides on a project? So, okay, everyone who raised your hands, Cathy wants to meet with every one of you when we're done. So you can give us your cards. So for folks whose hands were not up, NACTO is the National Association of City Transportation Officials. It's a nonprofit organization founded in 1996. Their mission is to share data and urban best practices about making integrated transportation work in cities. One major output of their efforts is a set of guidebooks on best practices for urban streets, not rural streets put into urban environments. They have two guides. The NACTO the Urban Bikeway Design Guide is what they're best known for. It's now in its second edition. And this is a compilation of field-tested, engineer-approved best practices from cities all over the nation. And they now are adding on to that with the Urban Street Design Guide. You can get a beautiful 36-page preview. The real book is coming out this summer. And in this book, you'll find entire chapters on designing intersections where people feel safe crossing on bike and on foot. So if you haven't taken a look at NACTO, I'd really love to encourage you to do so. Greenways bring three other winning characteristics that we wanted to call out here. The first is that they are really, really cost effective. If you're looking at a basic greenway, all you're pretty much doing is you're flipping the stop signs, you are going to be planting some trees, and maybe you're adding some speed humps if you need to. The big ticket item is the arterial crossings, and that's it for a basic greenway. The 2-mile greenway that was profiled in this film cost $250,000 to build. That was it. It's getting, in 2011, 1,600 riders a day. That number's been going up 60% year on year, right? So we're getting the kind of ridership you would expect from a full mixed-use trail, and for a fraction of the price. If you look at that $250,000 for going, I did the math, that would buy us about 500 feet of the Burke-Gilman rehabilitation in Lake Forest Park. So it's incredibly cost effective, and you're also not creating a new facility you're gonna have to maintain over the years. Another thing that we love about Greenways is the breadth of community support that you get and the strength of community support. And when we think about it, it makes sense. If you're building a bike lane or a sharrow or even a bike boulevard, you're solving a transportation problem. And it's a problem that it's really a minority of your community that's really invested in, of moving bikes. When you're building greenways, you're solving the problem of bikes, but you're doing it by solving the highest order problems that neighborhoods have, right? Are my kids able to be safe? Do we have a livable community? Again, my kids, can they play in the street? Is this going to be a good neighborhood for them to grow up in? So if we can bring in some data here, because Portland's actually been doing research after they build bike boulevards and greenways. There was one on Salmon Street that I just grabbed some numbers from. 74% of people said their sense of community was improved, 72% higher quality of life. And on a street where the most popular form of transportation is cars and trucks, that's the #1 primary form of transportation, only 6% of people said they would want this greenway designation ripped out if they could. So it's really, really popular, including with drivers. And that's something that I think is really important. So what greenways really offer when you add this all up is the ability to get past the chicken and the egg of, well, no one bikes, can we invest in biking? Instead, you invest in something everyone wants, and as a consequence, you get a city where suddenly people can also bike through as well. This is a third advantage. I stole this from Greg Raisman and Mark Lear, who are in the film. And this is the fact that in Portland, if you look at the street network, you look at the places we've historically put bike infrastructure on the arterials, you don't have that many streets to work with, right? That's about it for the entire network. Now, when you add in the residential street network, you get a really rich set of possibilities, and you really can make a network that goes from anywhere to anywhere here. So you get good connectivity using these residential streets. The last thing I want to call out here is this work by Roger Geller, and it's not specifically about greenways, but none of this would be happening without it. It's easily the most influential work to be happening in North American bike planning in 20 years. Who's already seen this graph? So for the other half of the room, I just want to make sure you don't leave without this. This is a market segmentation model for bicycling, and it shows the 4 different types of cyclists. The 1%, the tiny little group there, is the strong and fearless. These are pretty much, not all men, but mostly men. They're gonna ride whether you build bike lanes or not. They'll probably like the bike lanes, they'll probably ride on them. They're gonna ride anyway, they don't care. And yep, so the next 7% is the enthused and confident. And these are also mostly men. These are people who are gonna ride a bike if you make it just a little bit safer. These are the people who are using those arterial bike lanes that we've built all over Seattle, that Portland built for a number of years. And these are the people who drove what's in the AASHTO guide today for bike facilities. The infrastructure we have has historically been designed around the needs of that 7%, because they were the vocal ones. There's a great article by Peter Firth about this if anyone's interested. The thing I want to call out here is when you do an event about bicycling, when you ask for community input, these are the people you're going to be hearing from. They're going to be giving the bulk of the feedback. If you do the things they want, you're not going to make bicycling possible for the majority of your community, the 60%, the interested but concerned. And this is where Greenways, and really where, I'd say, 21st century bike design is focusing on, of how do we make the majority of people, the kind of people who you see taking their family in a minivan to the Burke-Gilman Trail to go ride and then drive home, how do you give these people the ability to use bicycling on streets for transportation, not just for recreation? And this is something that is really the cornerstone of what we're doing as an organization, is getting these 60% out there and able to ride. I also want to add the 4th group, no interest in bicycling. At least that's how they feel right now. It might change, but we'll take them at face value. This is a third of your community. We care that they're happy with what we do. If they're not, it's not going to work in the long term. That's where Greenways, again, are successful, is that they have measurable outputs that they care about. Improved walkability, fewer car crashes, safer streets for their kids, because they might not want to bike, but their kids might be interested. Kids love to bike. And that's why we're interested in Greenways. So my reason for calling this slide out is, in your cities, when you're talking about facilities, really to consider what segments are you thinking about. And if you're leaving out a big piece of the pie, to try to reshift the conversation to be about everyone rather than about the people who are speaking out today. I'm now going to shift us over just to an introduction about what's been going on with Seattle, and then I'm going to hand you over to Cathy. Very, very brief introduction to bicycling in Seattle. One slide. We started Neighborhood Greenways about 18 months ago. The challenge is really actually our success. We have an award-winning network of bike lanes and sharrows. We are one of the top cities in America for bicycling. We've built our success on facilities that look kind of like that. And suddenly we had this surge of interest of people like Cathy Tuttle, if I may say, middle-aged moms with kids who are wondering, why can't I go to school with my children? Why can't my kids bike to school? Why is this just, for a small percentage of our population? So we have this disconnect between what we've built and what the population wanted. And now Seattle is rewriting the bike master plan around greenways and around that 60%. And suddenly we have Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. And there are now 20 groups, plus Kirkland just started a few weeks ago. And what's happening is that there are community members who are really eager to have safe streets in their neighborhoods. They want to walk, they want to bike, and they get involved with us. What we're doing as an organization right now is focusing on identifying and advocating for candidate routes that make for great greenways, where people can have safe, healthy lives. And what we're doing is focusing deliverables that we can get into the bike master plan. And Cathy's going to be talking a lot more about this. The way it's worked for us, what we do as a group, is that we're taking established traffic practices, we're taking established traffic calming practices, we're feeding the output of community wisdom into what SDOT is doing. So traffic engineers can come in, they can do tube counts, they can look at turning movements, they can look at satellite images, but they don't really get that holistic picture. What's it actually like to live in this neighborhood? And what we're coming in is giving them that qualitative understanding. You might know how many cars are going to go through my street, but you don't really know what it feels like to experience that number of cars on our street unless you're actually embedded in the community and you've had a chance to understand the community. So what we're doing is we're gathering this data and we're supplementing what our city engineers already know. And the way we're doing this is by having people scouting out routes using standardized criteria. Cathy will talk a bit more about this. And we're integrating it into a citywide Greenways map. And again, Cathy's going to talk all about this. On that note, I'm going to hand you off to Cathy now.
Thanks, Eli.
Sure.
Okay. So, yeah, we're really thinking, actually, when we're doing greenways, although all you've been seeing so far is bicycles, we're really thinking beyond the bicycle, too. We're really looking at streets as places for people, as extending the value of a street to be a place that people enjoy, to look at what benefit people can have from streets, not just for biking and not just for walking, but streets as a valuable part of communities. That's what we're really seeing as the long-term benefit of this whole Greenways movement. And in fact, this is a movement that I see happening across America right now. I mean, people are trying to reclaim their streets as places for people. Not all their streets. I mean, yes, you're going to need your freight corridors, and you're going to need your bus corridors, and you're going to need to move cars and move vehicles efficiently, but there are a set of streets that we need to reclaim for people. And because we are working right now in Seattle on our bicycle master plan, that's forced us to think primarily about bicycling. But once the MP update is done next year, or this year, it'll be done, then we're going to go back to start thinking about how streets are valuable for people who are walking dogs, for people walking to school, for runners. How can you be outside in your neighborhood, and how can transportation planners, transportation engineers, engineer places that we value as places for people? So that's the goal of the Neighborhood Greenways movement. And I just wanted to call out to a couple of the campaigns. This is how we organize what we're doing in a set of campaigns, and this is how we reach out to the business community. And I wanted to just highlight a few of these. Yes, somebody noticed that, safe routes to bars. Now you can laugh about safe routes to bars.
I totally
That's a really good point. It really is from the bar rather than to the bar, or maybe it's to the second bar. There you go. So that turns out to be a really important project that came out of the Fremont neighborhood in Seattle. I don't know. It did, and it is adopted by the Capitol Hill Central neighborhood of Seattle, and so people are finding it important because of because there naturally are some issues about driving under the influence and distracted driving. I mean, we're addressing some safety issues here, but it's also an issue that has really attracted a lot of small business and property developers. That's where, so we did our first fundraising campaign for Seattle Neighborhood Greenways in December, and a lot of our funding came from small business developers and property owners in small business corridors saying, yes, we want to have these healthy streets in our neighborhood. We want to have safe routes to bars, safe routes to restaurants. We want to kind of think about our neighborhoods as safe places. Safe routes to health, I actually wanted to call out too. That's a relatively new program, but that's something where we're bringing in a lot of large businesses. Now, I say we're thinking of this, and it is an actual kind of we're thinking about it too. I mean, there are people like Eli. I'm not saying there's 100 people like Eli, but there are no other people like Eli. But there are 100 people with Eli level of skill in our Neighborhood Greenways organization, which is great. I mean, there are awesome professional people who are thinking about this kind of thing. So the Safe Routes to Health initiative came out of the community and from retired nurses, from physicians, from people saying, we need a way to get our loved ones to and from healthcare without using a car. And it's a really important issue, and it's also something that's piqued the interest of a number of local healthcare institutions. So we're pulling in large businesses as well as the community with that. So we're working with Swedish Hospital, Children's Hospital, and with Harborview. So, and working with something with UW Hospital as well. And they're saying, yes, we really know that not just our staff, that we want to encourage them to walk and bike to work, but we know that patients and caregivers, it's not like you're going to bike if you're going in to get knee surgery, but you still want to know, how to get to health care. And then actually the last one I just wanted to point out was the Safe Routes Resilience Plan. Again, I know a lot of you are working on emergency preparedness, and you've probably noticed in some of the recent hurricanes and earthquakes and all that, people pick up their bikes. They need to use their bikes after an emergency event. What would happen if you actually were proactive about this and actually did a Safe Routes Resilience Plan? We're working on this with the Seattle Office of Emergency Management. So, did you know that, SDOT, that we're doing that? We are. So these are things that are like really important that you really need to think about, sort of beyond the bike. So where's my little thing? So I'm going back to this segmentation model here. And what we've been looking at is this really sweet spot, as Eli said, of that 60% of interested but concerned people. We really care about how they think about biking. So I'm shifting back to biking only. And that doesn't say segmentation model anymore. It says investing in Wendy. And Wendy is what we're calling our new market segment. This came out of another one of our brilliant Greenways volunteers who worked for Apple, Google, Microsoft, in doing user experience studies. So he's rigorously tested who is the person that represents this 60%. It's a way of marketing to a particular person, and it's a way of remembering who that particular person is. We're marketing now, we're investing now in the Greenways movement to Wendy. She is the person that we really are caring about, and it's how we're selling this whole Greenway program as we go out to our communities. So we teach people in the whole Greenway community movement in Seattle about who Wendy is. We teach them about how to do community mapping. And then we do a lot of reiteration and evaluation and the kinds of things that community groups often do. A lot of advocacy, and we do a lot of celebration. But we start with letting people know who Wendy is. And we have a picture. This is Wendy. So she is me, my kids back there. She is our new market segment. I am a worried cyclist. Actually, who here is a worried cyclist? Eli is? Who? So the rest of you are all like comfortable riding on those bike lanes. Not me! I definitely don't like to ride on those bike lanes, in particular if I'm riding with my kids. So I do a lot of biking. I teach biking, I lead bicycle tours, and I am the biggest chicken on the road. And I think that I am, and people like Wendy, and I know I am because of Bob's research, Bob Edmondson, who's done this Wendy persona user experience work, this is the person that we're planning for. If a road is safe enough for Wendy, then it's safe enough for everyone. So that is who our greenways need to reach in the context of the bicycle master plan. And this is the message that we've spread throughout our whole kind of community, saying this is the person we're planning for. So the people who show up to Greenways meetings are often what we call eddies, the people who are less wary on the road than Wendy is. They're not fearless, but they're comfortable commuting, and so we need to teach them how to plan and how to plan routes and how to evaluate routes for her. So this is something that we're doing, is we're putting a face on the people that we're planning for through this kind of user experience study. And again, Eli said, we do a lot of mapping. I have been to, myself, maybe 100 of these meetings, distributed among these 20 groups. There's a lot of what we call tribal knowledge. These are user experience words, I guess, tribal knowledge is. And there is a lot of tribal knowledge of, if you live in a neighborhood, that particular street is difficult to get across when school lets out. But you as engineers might not know that because your kids don't go to that school. But the tribe who lives in that neighborhood knows the things that are possible or impossible in their particular neighborhood. So we've gone to farmers markets and bike stores and community groups, and people have sketched. People love to do this activity too. They love to put circles on maps and say, I go here and this is not safe and we do this. And I know that you do a lot of this in your professional work too. You do charrettes, you put maps out on tables, but we expect that the people who are doing this are also thinking about Wendy while they're sketching out those maps, so that they're going in not just with a pen and saying this is what I do, but they're also representing a person who's not there in the room. And then we end up with these swirly maps. The green routes are the routes the red routes are the ones that we have said, with our tribal knowledge, we feel are greenways that are appropriate for people to ride on. And these things have been incorporated through a lot of work on the part of our experts into directly into the bicycle master plan. I mean, we worked with SDOT to find out the best way to take our GIS, export it through ArcGIS and these KML files. And so we've trained people enough to go out and say, these are the routes that we prefer within our neighborhood. And then we also had a very rigorous set of criteria of what those routes were. I mean, we were looking for networking, we were looking for community support, we were looking to see if these routes also had street features, already existing street features, street trees, and also street signals, things that would allow these streets to be better greenways candidates as we pushed forward on them. This kind of mapping represents thousands and thousands of hours of community input, and it's a huge win in today's very fiscally constrained world. I mean, people have gone out and they've put all of this information on maps, distributed it to SDOT. But it's also, not only is it a huge win as far as information sharing, but it's a huge win as far as buy-in. So people are saying within their neighborhoods, these are the places that I really care about. These are the places that I want to go, and we believe Wendy wants to go as a community. So we didn't stop there as an organization. We kept on educating people. So this is actually, do you remember this? Oh, Dong Ho's out there. Dong Ho's up there on stage with Peter Han. We did a lot of community events like this where we were educating people again about what a greenway is, what a kind of representing what a community is, and we reiterated these maps as we created them. We said this is how this mapping process worked. Sorry again. But in the process of doing this too, we also were creating the next generation of very civically minded people. So the people that got engaged in Greenways often joined their community councils, often joined their Chamber of Commerces. They became kind of the next generation supporting this idea of safe and healthy streets. So in this case, they're learning from experts like Dong Ho and Peter Han about what the city of Seattle believes make especially effective streets. So this kind of learning goes on within Seattle Neighborhood Greenways. And then we also went out on the streets themselves and evaluated them, talked to neighbors, took lots of walking tours like this. And this actually turned out to be more and more of a kind of a political support for what people were doing. We always, by the way, too, invite our politicians along on our walks and rides. And this is a very important point when you're out there doing it in your own community. So that the woman in the pink jacket behind Dong Ho there is Councilmember Sally Bagshaw, who's one of our biggest supporters of Greenway. But we've had many city council members come along on walks and rides as we're putting forward this network. The other thing that we've been really focused on as this bicycle master plan nears completion is analyzing gaps. Where would Wendy go? So this is something that this map on the top comes from San Jose, and it is a level of service map from the Mineta Institute, saying that there can be these gaps in how people use streets. The bottom map is a gap analysis from the city of Portland. This is really important. I mean, we want to know, and we're analyzing our own bicycle master plan with this Mineta level of service gap analysis, is where would Wendy go and where is Wendy stuck in this map? So Wendy can go in the level of service map on the black line, but she can't go on the gray line. So we're constantly reevaluating as we get more information about how to move people around the city. So when people go out and do bike master plan meetings, they typically don't have these kind of people show up for them. Kids, seniors, and the mayor are in this picture. We really do a lot to get as much kind of strong political support from people who are not ordinarily represented in the room. This is a presentation. Almost every one of the City of Seattle Mayor's town halls that he did last year, we had people from Greenways at those meetings thanking him for what he did. So this is just a group of kids with a bicycle on the card saying, "Thank you, Mayor McGinn, for supporting us." This is a really important thing for moving this whole project forward, is to make sure that you continue to thank people and to continue to have different kinds of audiences at the events. And then this is one of the first greenways to open in Seattle. This is the Wallingford Greenway, and we had a huge community event. These are people who really care about their neighborhood and are going to continue to vote for funding to support more greenways. This is a group of kids that came with a group called Kiddical Mass, and they have the ice cream gelato bike that they're getting served from. These kinds of activities are essential to push forward the Greenway message. So the closing thoughts about what we're doing with this is we're constantly being asked of how we took just a few neighbors that were interested in making safe streets and how we brought that magic to a large number of groups, in the city. And in fact, Eli and I are going tomorrow to Portland to talk to them about how we are doing greenways, which is pretty amazing since they're the ones who made the movie about greenways. And so the thoughts that I had about this from a community perspective of what I can share with you as professionals working in the city and professionals who are engineers or consultants, is that there's some steps that you can take that actually you can get some of this magic. It does rub off. It is possible to get this kind of community engagement, which is so valuable, because people are going to support your work, they're going to pay for your work, you're going to get political support if you actually bring people into this whole process. So I think often what we start with, when you're working on public projects, is you go out and you talk to the key influencers. You talk to the head of the city councils, or you talk to the heads of the business associations. That's really important. You have to start with that. You have to meet the people who are out there. You have to know who you're talking to, who the key influencers are. But then you have to move beyond that. You have to start saying, you have to start educating them. You have to maybe show them that street film, or talk to them about how they can represent other parts of their city, how they can represent Wendy or some other kind of person that isn't them. You have to teach them how to do mapping so that it kind of connects the city together. And then I think it's very important, if you're asking people to do safe streets plans, is to actually go out and do a lot of activities with people, to go out and do walks, to do bike rides with people, to actually engage them on the ground, to test whether the plans that they're making make sense. I think that you can't expect the information that you're sharing, or that they're sharing with you, to make any sense until you're actually out there walking it and biking it. And then finally, the most important thing is celebrate every little win that you have. This is how we're building the infrastructure. It's just one little street at a time, one stoplight, one bike corral. We need to get wins out into the public eye so that people support more of them, and this whole group continues to grow. That it isn't just, that we expect the whole city to suddenly become a city of streets that are wonderful for people, and where people are playing in the street and kids are walking in the street. I mean, it is an incremental movement, but you have to celebrate every win, and also, I mean, we spend a lot of time thanking the city for what they're doing for us. So, and I thank you for being engineers. Eli is going to say just a few more words about kind of wrapping up, but.
So I also just wanted to leave with one thought, which is be a hero. So all of you have a chance to be heroes to your communities. As you guys know, we're starting to actually see traffic engineers, transportation leaders becoming national heroes. There's, of course, Rayla Hood and JSK, the first transportation manager who we know by her 3-letter initials. So these are probably some of the 2 best known people, but they don't have to have a monopoly on being heroes. When we go down to Portland, one of the things that amazes us is to see the local heroes. When we see Greg Raisman and Mark Lear from that video, the way people in the community treat them, they really are loved and adored. And to me, it makes actually really good sense, because they're people who are making it possible for people's kids to be able to walk to school, the ability for their homes to be desirable places, not just houses on streets. They really are, in their communities, changing the world. And they get really, I guess, a return on that from their community. So if you haven't already, I would encourage you to consider taking your first step. If you haven't looked at NACTO, go online, check out some of the guidance. If you're a consultant, consider informing some of your clients of these treatments. And if you're in government, let your elected officials know that these tools exist. There are other choices. And if your planners aren't thinking about greenways, or if you're a planner and you're not thinking about them yet, we would totally love to talk to you. So come on and grab us or email us. And that's it. Thank you.
Okay, we're not going to let them get away here. So, questions. Cathy, would you like to come back up? Sure. Questions for Cathy and for Eli. Here we go. Edward.
So, so you indicated about 1,000 daily trips is the preference for, below 1,000 is a preference for a greenway.
Closer to 500, actually.
Close to 500. So is it that you're looking for roads that already carry less than that amount, or are you looking to change that road character, that it may be carrying more than that by the, the T intersections, the splits, and change the character so it carries less than, the 500, the 700 daily trips.
So what we've heard from Portland is between 500 and 1,000, but they try to get it sort of closer and closer to that 500 mark, and they want to start with that number of vehicles, and they want to maintain that number of vehicles. So that's the real key, is to not let it kind of creep up. So they do a lot of work to what they call maintain traffic, and that can include putting in traffic maintainers, which are diverters, to keep that number low. Because the danger with a greenway and with those streets that are one off of main arterials, that people start using them for cut-through traffic, and then that'll raise the speed and the traffic volume up.
So it's not one to divert existing, it's not a traffic calming measure in itself, it's already looking for the low volumes, maintaining it and just making it more comfortable for the non.
And it turns out there are quite a few streets within a residential grid that work really well.
And if you look at also the earlier history of bike boulevards in Portland, they actually did. Lincoln Harrison, I think, was 3,000-4,000 vehicles a day. And the political cost of getting it down to a bike boulevard was astronomical, and they never wanted to go through that again.
Have you implemented many greenways that have jogs in them? We have one corridor that we're looking at, but we realize to cross one of our, make one of our arterial crossings, we really need to bump up to another street.
It's challenging, and I would recommend that you look at Portland. There's a place called the Going, like the word you spell going my way, the Going Greenway, where they've engineered a very nice solution to it. Mm-hmm. But I assume we're going to be doing something like that whenever we do meet those kinds of intersections in Seattle.
And you can also find that treatment in Vancouver, BC. I think it's relatively common when you can have a greenway and have one block of cycle track, and being very strategic where you build cycle track because you have to take out parking, then return to a greenway. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of examples of cities that have done that.
Steve.
I heard you mention that low 6% oppositional number that would have them ripped out if they could. And I'm just wondering if there's more to that story that we should know, like how much trouble are those people causing you? And I ask you this in part because we actually had a public records request for how much gas tax money we've invested on certain of your streets. And so I'm wondering if that might be one of the 6%.
So I can tell you from the study, there really wasn't qualitative research along with the quantitative research. So I don't know what was the rationale for those people.
I do know that any public project that you do will always have some pushback on it. But this is a particularly low amount of pushback, certainly relative to trying to put in, say, a bike lane or cycle track. I mean, you're going to get a whole lot more pushback on that kind of facility development than you will on a greenway. Plus, the thing that we're finding with the Greenways development is that we have this enthusiastic support on the other side. So that counts for something too. Whereas if you're putting in a bike lane, you'll get some Cascade members, Cascade Bike Club members, but you won't get these like rabid moms and hot cycles and kid cycles and these kinds of people showing up for meetings that will push the project over the top easily.
Other questions?
This is kind of a similar question. We have a number of streets that have cut-through traffic problems, and we're starting a couple of projects on those. And the residents there are very concerned about the cut-through traffic volumes, but when we bring up partial closures, diverters, things like that, they don't want to give up their ability to access their homes quickly. So I'm wondering, do you have any experience on how to get buy-off from the residents who would be impacted by the diverters?
By diverters in particular?
No, or partial closures or other things that would reduce cut-through traffic but also limit the residents themselves' ability to access them.
I mean, I've definitely run into situations, and I'm sure folks from SDOT can talk to this as well, where people might have to make a trip around their block in order to get into their street. And yes, people are a little bit odd about that sometimes. And do talk about the amount of gas that they're going to use doing that extra block face. As far as a positive, I mean, I don't want to say like pit the community against each other, but I think that what you want to do is show people examples of really positive street treatments. And we're going to have more and more in Seattle that you can point to. We do have this movie you can point to say, you know, would you like the benefit of these kinds of treatments in your neighborhood? You know, can you see the benefit of having a quiet street? And I think a lot of people, you know, you're responding to something kind of very deep inside of you where you want to have a street that is a pleasant outdoor environment where you can walk across the street easily to talk to your neighbors. I mean, I think that once people understand that value of a street is almost kind of a linear park, you know, that's outside of their door, they're willing to put up with the inconvenience of having to go that extra 3 block faces to get to their parking space. But not always. You're always going to have that 6% of people that kind of push back a little bit, and just expect it. You know, I don't think there's a way around that. There's no way to please everyone.
I guess a question I had is when you get into, you've got the neighborhood group and everybody's at the table and you're working through these things, and I'm looking at your pictures and I'm looking at the movie, and there's one part of me that's saying, wow, you know, I want my street to look like, I want, and then but I'm thinking there's probably somebody that's also saying, yeah, I'd really like that in my neighborhood, but I don't want all those people going in front of my house. So what are the dynamics there that you have been running into as far as when you get to that stage where you've got to pick 1 or 2 streets within this entire neighborhood?
What's been happening in Portland is as these facilities get added, and this may be true in Vancouver, BC too, is that people are clamoring to be on that network. I mean, it's a trail network that adds value. Well, I don't know if there's any studies yet that they're adding value, but they're advertised in real estate ads. This you know, particular house is on Clinton Greenway, and it adds some value to that piece of property where they wouldn't be putting it into their ads. So I think, you know, the first street or 2 that you do in your communities that you're working in are going to get a little bit of pushback there. They're going to say, well, who's coming past my street? But I think once that they're more established in the region, that there's going to be a lot of positive, you know, clamoring. We want to have one of those in our neighborhood too. You know, we want to have something. We want to live on that street.
Question back here.
Well, just a statement that I'm really impressed with the changes to Ravenna Boulevard. I noticed that this summer, and whoever did that did a pretty great job.
Down with it.
Thank you.
How do you pull in talks with emergency personnel? Because, you know, one thing, even with regular traffic calming devices where you've got maybe an established speeding or safety problem and you're using traffic calming to kind of help pull that down. Here you might be choosing a street where it doesn't have identifiable, maybe the speeds aren't so high, so you're pulling these in, but are you getting a lot of you know, kind of pushback from?
So you're talking about ambulances and fire engines?
Fire department in particular.
Yeah, in particular because they have the width requirements too.
Right.
I mean, well, there need to be emergency routes established, and some of those are not going to be able to be greenways because of emergency response.
So, John, that's a very good question. We actually have a greenway on a fire response route that we're coordinating very closely with fire. So, on this particular one in West Seattle is actually parallel to a arterial street, and so it's used as a cut-through route. So there's actually a community support to really try to make that a livable street. And so kind of a, you know, do you make the arterial street work and then keep the residential street calm so that it's available and not encourage a cut-through traffic. And also there's a really key to early coordination, so with arterial crossing treatment and how you treat that. We got a lot of feedback from our fire department saying, could you make the islands such that we can actually drive through it, so not have the sign in the middle, because they have higher clearance on their response vehicle. So we made our modification. They actually asked us to skinny up some of the islands so that they could actually jump onto the island if they need to. So I think getting that buy-off, making sure that they're comfortable, because they're going to be the key constituent, if they say no go, and that project's not going to win further.
Right, I mean, they really rule the decision making. I don't know if Portland does this, and I don't know if Seattle is considering this, these kind of rolled curbs too, where emergency response vehicles, you know, in an emergency can roll through the curb bulb out.
Or you could even have lower profile islands too, rather than the 6-inch, you could go to a 3-inch or a 2-inch. Just a little bit of a higher profile so that it provides a little bit of protection. You put the signs in so that it gives target value for the drivers. And then eventually you can go to the full height later on. But you know, trying to make it successful to start off with.
That's a good question.
Back here.
How do these work in a more suburban context, or do they, where you don't have the luxury of a grid that was put in many years ago?
So this is something that I don't think we've had to deal with as a group yet. I can tell you down in Portland, Greg Raisman has been just dying for a suburban city interested in exploring these ideas, because says he's thought through it all and he'd love to talk to any planners. So if you're interested in Redmond, would love to talk to you.
Yeah, we'll connect you for sure.
Yes.
So what do you do in some areas when you put a greenway in and you have to close street parking for vehicles? How do you mitigate that concern by the homeowners that you've taken away the parking?
Well, so far that hasn't been an issue in Seattle. In fact, you know, the Greenway that I was most involved with, and actually Carol was working on with me, we added street parking in as a kind of traffic calming device. So greenways generally have parking allowed on them. There might be some, particularly if you're doing some curb bulb outs or something like that, there might be some parking that's taken away. And I'm sure you all know, you take away any parking, you know, you're going to face some pretty fierce opposition about it. But in general, that isn't an issue. So I don't know if that's universally going to be true that we're adding in parking as we put in greenways, but I think that we're not going to be taking away a lot.
Yeah, I think kind of in net, as we put in the greenway, we'll probably have some impact on parking, especially when in Seattle we don't historically provide stop control at residential streets. We're introducing these, and so when stop signs are installed, obviously we want to have
each stop sign has 20 feet.
So that's going to have some impact, and then really low volume. So having some encroachment is not going to be a big issue, and so enforcement is not going to be a huge priority. So net effect is no change to the community, just a good guidance. Arterial crossing is the location where parking will be impacted, because if you put a splitter island out there for protection, right, so you're trying to prevent through of it, you want to make sure that approach is clear, so you're pulling parking back.
Yeah, the film is really good. You kind of brought up an area that I'm interested in is how have you worked with the school district, for instance, on safe routes to schools and providing safe routes for kids to ride a bike to school, some of the needs.
So I've sat down with some of the school district transportation and board people who are interested in, well, actually they want to take away all the yellow buses. I mean, that's their plan ultimately, because it's a huge expense for the school district. So they're looking, I mean, they're creating their own kind of footprint around each school of identifying these children are expected to go to this school. What they haven't done is start investing in those safe routes to the schools. One of the programs that we're looking at is actually getting parents, teachers, and kids to go out and start mapping their own as a kind of a science project for middle school, maybe late elementary school, mapping what the safe routes to school are, because it's a real need, particularly if as the school pulls away these yellow bus services. We need the safe routes, though. I mean, the big problem, again, is always the arterial crossings. You know, where are the safe arterial crossings? And there are many schools that I think do not have safe ways to school yet. And that's one of the reasons we need to keep on funding that program.
Yes.
So the after studies, I'm just trying to gauge when you talk how much of an increase in biking, in total biking, do you see? Because obviously you're going to draw maybe from the adjacent streets. This one's more attractive, so you're going to maybe have more bikes on that street. But in the total, what I hope of to get that 60% biking that isn't today, is there something, you know, as so engineers with numbers, and, you know, what is there something you can throw out that on an after study that's kind of showing, yeah, this is increased biking by this amount? And I know it's tough, everyone's different, but have we got anything?
I mean, I think the easiest thing to do would be to get you the Peabot bicycle counts. What they've noticed, I think, overall, is that their greenways are going up in ridership about 60%. Going is not an exception. Their traditional infrastructure at the same time is going up. It's just in the single-digit percentage points, right? And that's actually why they did this, is the realization that they really have tapped out the marketplace of that 7%, and they had to target a new market if they wanted to continue growing bike share. So if you want, we can exchange cards. I'd be really happy to get you some data.
How much work have you guys done with looking at not just the U.S., but Europe and other locations? I mean, you go to Amsterdam or some of these other locations in Europe, and their park and ride lots are bike and ride lots.
We wish. I think it's going to take a whole kind of political change of view. We're super familiar with what is happening in Europe. It's just a question of whether we can convince the general public that they want to keep their cars at home most of the time. And we're a long way from that. So you guys are still going to be doing mostly plans for the automobile, I think.
And just personally, I have Dutch family, I speak Dutch, and yeah, it's what we call a neighborhood greenway here in the Netherlands, what you just call a street. This is what people live on, right? You wouldn't think of it as something special.
Right. I lived for a year in 2006, 2007 in Sweden, and was studying a lot of this as well. So, but and we've asked, the kind of the preeminent transportation planners in America why they aren't doing what the Dutch are doing or what the Swedes are doing, and they're saying, well, it won't happen until we kind of value this mode of transportation a lot more than we do.
Well, I guess that was my point. It seems like that might be a benchmark. And what you're really looking at is what's the gap analysis once we understand where we're at. Right. How do we bridge that?
But given that we have to plan for the car too, I think that this is maybe the best tool that we have in our toolbox.
So one thing I didn't mention is in your short tenure, I mean, you're in your 18th month as an organization, but in November, Seattle Greenways was awarded the 2012 Sustainable Seattle Award for Livable Urban Communities, and so that's very, very impressive in the work that you started, and obviously you've hit upon something. The thing that seems to ring true the strongest with me is that we're now hearing from the Wendys. We've always heard from the Eddies, and that's been valuable input. And as a former county traffic engineer, when we needed to reach out to the bicycle community, it was talking to the wheelmen and the Cascades of the world, because we didn't know where else to go to. So it's very important, I think, for a local agency to be able to have contact people within the community, and within neighborhoods. Very, very valuable. So anyway, we've run out of time. You'll be here for a few more minutes afterwards, so if you have additional questions, please come up. But I want to thank Eli and Cathy for coming today.